Jane doesn't need to know every little thing. I stopped cold beneath the open side window of the house I had owned for less than 3 weeks. That was my mother's voice. I had turned onto my new street minutes earlier and found her car sitting in my driveway. Nobody was supposed to be inside. I hadn't given anyone permission to come over. Then I heard my sister-in-law, Melissa. This room would be perfect for the baby eventually. I moved closer to the window. Melissa's friend Rachel laughed. "Does Jane even know you guys are here?" My mother, Diane, answered like the question was ridiculous. "She'll be fine." Through the window, I watched Melissa walk into my kitchen and open one of my cabinets. "I'd put the coffee machine here," she said, "although this paint would definitely have to change." My mother laughed. I almost marched through the front door. Almost. Instead, I stayed exactly where I was, because something about the way they were talking bothered me more than the fact that they had entered without permission. They weren't admiring my house. They were planning for Melissa to live in it. And I had never offered it to her. "My name is Jane Carter. I'm 32, and I work as a mortgage underwriter. Buying that 3-bedroom house had taken years of saving. I deliberately kept the purchase quiet. In my family, financial success had always come with an invisible invoice. A raise meant someone suddenly needed a loan. A bonus meant I could help out. Saying no usually earned me the same accusation. "You're doing well, Jane. Why are you being selfish?" So this time, I wanted one accomplishment that belonged to me before everyone started calculating what they could do with it. Only Mom knew the address. I'd invited her over 2 days earlier. That was why I initially thought she might simply be showing off my house. Then Melissa opened another cabinet. "We'll need more storage." "Wait." That single word kept me outside. I backed away from the window before anyone noticed me and returned to my car farther down the street. 10 minutes later, the front door opened. Mom came out first. Melissa and Rachel followed. I watched Mom turn around, pull a key from her purse, and lock my front door. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. I had never given her a key. Once their car disappeared, I walked back to my house and stared at the lock. I didn't call Mom. I didn't call Melissa. I called a locksmith. "Do you just want the front door rekeyed?" he asked. I looked at the house I had spent years earning. "No," I said, "every single lock." Because now this wasn't about an unwanted tour. Someone had secretly gained access to my home. And I needed to know how. That evening, my mother called me like she hadn't spent the afternoon walking people through my house. "So," Mom said brightly, "what are you planning to do with all that space?" I sat at my kitchen counter and looked toward the front door. The locksmith had finished less than an hour earlier. Every exterior lock had been changed. "I haven't decided yet." Mom paused. "Well, 3 bedrooms is a lot for one person." There it was. I kept my voice neutral. "Is it?" "You know Brandon and Melissa's lease is almost up. Their landlord raised the rent again." I said nothing. Mom continued. "They're trying to save money, Jane. Meanwhile, you have rooms sitting empty." I had heard versions of this argument my entire adult life. When I received my first major bonus, Mom suggested I lend money to a cousin. When I hesitated, she said, "Family helps family." When I started earning more, somehow my income became information everyone was entitled to know. My biggest weakness had always been avoiding the fight that came after saying no. But that afternoon, I had watched someone open my kitchen cabinets while discussing how she would arrange them. So I asked the question directly. "Mom, did you tell Melissa she could live here?" Silence. Not confusion. Silence. Then her tone changed. "Where is this coming from?" "It's a simple question. Jane, you always assume the worst when someone tries to help." I almost laughed. "Help who?" "I'm thinking about solutions. Brandon and Melissa need somewhere affordable, and you have more room than you need. There's nothing wrong with discussing possibilities. She still didn't know I had seen them. I decided not to tell her yet. Okay, I said. Okay, what? Nothing, I was asking. After we hung up, I went upstairs and opened the small drawer where I kept documents, spare batteries, and the extra key that came with the house. The key was there. I picked it up. If Mom had simply stolen my spare, this should have been missing. Then I remembered her visit 2 days earlier. My phone had rung while we were downstairs. Work, I'd told her. Give me 5 minutes. I had gone upstairs and closed my office door. Mom had been alone downstairs. 5 minutes was more than enough time to find the drawer. But why return the key? My phone buzzed. Melissa. Her message read, "Thank you for being willing to help us. Your mom said you'd understand." I read it twice. The tour hadn't been Mom casually showing off my new house. Melissa believed there was an arrangement. I typed, "What exactly did Mom tell you?" The typing bubbles appeared, then disappeared. They came back. Finally, a message arrived. She said you already agreed. The next afternoon, I walked into my parents' house for Sunday lunch, knowing at least 3 people at that table believed a decision had been made about my home. Brandon looked up before I had even put my bag down. "Hey, seriously, Jane, thank you." I stopped beside the dining table. "For what?" His smile faded. Melissa immediately looked at Mom. Dad lowered his fork. Brandon glanced between us, for giving us some breathing room. What breathing room? Nobody answered for a second. Then Melissa spoke carefully. "Your mom said we could stay at your place for 6 months, just until we save enough to get another apartment." 6 months. Yesterday, I had only heard Melissa talking about where she would put things. Now, I finally understood why. Brandon leaned forward. "We're not trying to take advantage. 6 months would let us rebuild our savings." "When are you supposedly moving in?" "Next weekend." I turned toward Mom. She didn't look embarrassed. She looked annoyed that I was making this difficult. "When," I asked her, "did I agree to any of this?" Mom put down her glass. "You told me months ago you'd always help your brother." "I said I would help Brandon if he needed me. I didn't give him my house." "You're one person, Jane," she replied. "They're a married couple trying to build a family. You have 3 bedrooms." "And I bought all 3 of them." Dad shifted uncomfortably. Maybe everybody should calm down. But Melissa was staring at Mom now. "Diane, you said Jane knew." Mom waved her hand. "I knew how Jane would react initially. She always needs time." Brandon's expression hardened. "We already told our landlord we're leaving." I looked at him before speaking to me. Mom said it was settled. That was the power Mom had always counted on, making commitments first, then presenting me with the consequences until saying no felt crueler than surrendering. Except this time she had done it with my home. I looked directly at Melissa. "I saw the tour yesterday." Her face went pale. Rachel wasn't there to laugh it off now. "You saw us." "I saw you in my kitchen. I heard you discussing the bedrooms. I heard Mom say I didn't need to know." Mom's jaw tightened. I turned to her. "And I watched you lock my front door." Brandon frowned. "What?" I kept my eyes on Mom. "Where did you get a key?" Instead of answering, she pushed back her chair. "This is unbelievable. You're humiliating everyone over a house with empty bedrooms." "That wasn't my question." "You're making this into something ugly." "No, I'm asking how you entered property you don't own." Mom stared at me for several seconds, then folded her arms. "You'll calm down. We'll discuss this when you're ready to be reasonable." That sentence settled something inside me. She still thought this was a negotiation. I picked up my bag. "No, Mom, there's nothing left to discuss." I reached the doorway before Brandon suddenly called after me. Wait, Jane. I turned. His face had changed. Melissa already ordered things for the house. I left my parents' house before anyone could turn Melissa's purchases into another reason I was supposed to surrender. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew exactly what I needed. Not another argument with Mom. Vax. The new locks were in place, but I still didn't know how far she had gone or how she had obtained that key. So I called Melissa. She answered after the second ring. Jane, I'm sorry. I need you to tell me exactly what happened. A long pause followed. Then she said, Your mom came to us first. I sat down at my kitchen table. Melissa explained that Mom knew their lease was ending and their landlord had raised the rent. According to Mom, my new house solved everything. She said you agreed we could stay 6 months, Melissa said. She made it sound completely settled. And yesterday, she invited me to see where we'd be living. That explained the confidence I had heard during the tour. Then Melissa added quietly, She also said you were too independent for your own good. I stared at the wall. What does that mean? She said having family around would be good for you. Like, you wouldn't admit you needed it. I almost laughed. Mom had transformed invading my home into something she was supposedly doing for me. Melissa continued. I should have called you myself. I know that now. How did she get the key? This time, Melissa hesitated. Jane, tell me. She said she copied it. My grip tightened around the phone. Melissa told me that during Mom's first visit, she had taken my spare key from the downstairs drawer while I was upstairs on a work call. She brought it to a nearby key-cutting kiosk, made a duplicate, then returned the original before I came back down. That was why my spare had never disappeared. This hadn't been a misunderstanding. Mom had known she didn't have permission. She had deliberately created access anyway. I looked toward the newly changed front lock. Nobody is moving into this house, Melissa. I understand. Does Brandon? He will, but there's another problem. Of course there was. We already gave notice on our apartment, she said, and Brandon paid the movers a deposit. It's non-refundable. I closed my eyes for a moment. Their situation was real, but I hadn't created it. I'm sorry you're dealing with that, I said, but Mom made a promise she had no right to make. I know. After we hung up, I placed my phone on the table. Then the doorbell rang. I opened the security camera feed. Mom stood on my porch. She reached into her purse and pulled out a key. I watched her insert it into the lock. It wouldn't turn. She pulled it out, stared at it, and tried again. Nothing. Her head slowly lifted toward the door. Then she started pounding. Jane. Another hard knock. Jane, open this door right now. I walked to the front door and opened it just far enough for the security chain to catch. Mom stood on the porch, holding the copied key between 2 fingers. Her face was flushed. Why did you change the locks? That was her first question. Not why are you upset? Not can we talk about what happened? She was angry because the key she had secretly made no longer worked. I looked at it. Did you copy my house key? Mom's mouth tightened. Jane, don't start. Did you copy it? She glanced toward the street, as though the neighbors hearing us would somehow be worse than what she had done. Finally, she sighed. Yes. There it was. No misunderstanding left. During your visit. Yes, but I had a reason. You took my spare key out of my drawer, copied it, brought it back, and never told me. I knew what you would say if I asked. I stared at her through the narrow opening. Exactly. She frowned. You knew I would say no, so you decided my answer didn't matter. That's not what happened. Then tell me what happened. Mom lifted both hands. Brandon and Melissa needed somewhere to stay. You have a house with 3 bedrooms. I was trying to solve a problem. With my property, For your brother. You promised them 6 months in a house you don't own. I knew once you thought about it. No, you were counting on me being too embarrassed to say no after they had already made plans. That stopped her. For the first time since she arrived, Mom didn't have an immediate answer. So I continued. You copied my key because you knew I hadn't given you one. You entered my house when I wasn't home. You brought Melissa and Rachel inside. You let Melissa plan where she would put her things. Then you told Brandon and Melissa I had agreed to something I knew nothing about. Mom's voice dropped. Must you make everything sound so terrible? I'm describing exactly what you did. Her expression hardened again. What are Brandon and Melissa supposed to do now? They gave notice. Melissa has already started preparing. People are going to ask why they suddenly need somewhere else to live. They can ask their landlord for an extension or find temporary housing. And if they caw, then they'll find another solution. Mom stared at me. You would actually leave your own brother scrambling when you have empty bedrooms. I'm not leaving him anywhere. You promised him something that wasn't yours. She shook her head. This family is going to remember this. So will I. I closed the door. For several seconds, I stood with my hand on the lock. Normally, that would have been the moment guilt took over. I would have imagined Brandon struggling with boxes, Melissa worrying about money, Mom telling relatives I had abandoned my brother. Then I would have fixed a problem I never created. Not this time. That evening, I opened our immediate family group chat. I kept the message simple. For clarity, I never offered Brandon and Melissa my house. I never agreed to let anyone move in for 6 months. I also did not authorize anyone to enter my home while I was away. Mom copied my spare key without my permission, so I have changed the locks. Brandon and Melissa will need to make other housing arrangements. I hit send. Mom responded almost immediately. This did not need to become a family spectacle. Before I could answer, another message appeared. Melissa. Jane is telling the truth. She never personally offered us the house. Diane told us Jane had already agreed. I should have confirmed it directly with Jane, and I'm sorry I didn't. I stared at the screen. That single message changed the entire conversation. Brandon called me 10 minutes later. He was angry. At first, some of that anger landed on me. You couldn't give us a couple weeks. I could have considered helping if you had asked me, I said, but nobody asked. He went quiet. Mom told me you'd already said yes. I know. And she actually copied your key. Yes. Another silence. Then Brandon muttered, she told us you gave it to her. That was when his anger finally shifted toward the person who had created the situation. The consequences didn't disappear just because the truth came out. Brandon and Melissa couldn't reverse everything. They lost the deposit they had paid the movers, and when their landlord couldn't guarantee they could remain in their apartment, they moved into a short-term rental while searching for another place. It cost them money. It caused arguments. But it did not cost me my home. And Mom discovered there were consequences for her too. A few days later, I went to my parents' house. I placed the emergency key Mom had once given me on the table and asked for mine back. She stared at me. You're taking this very far. No, I'm making things clear. I also removed her as an emergency contact from financial accounts, where I no longer wanted her involved. More importantly, I stopped giving her information she had spent years treating like family property. My salary was no longer discussed. Neither were bonuses, savings, purchases, anything involving my house. For several weeks, Mom barely spoke to me. When she did, it was usually the same demand. You embarrassed me. You should apologize. I never did. Eventually, she called. Her voice was quieter than usual. Are we going to stay like this forever? That depends. On what? You can disagree with my decisions. You can think I'm selfish. You can even be angry with me. I paused. But you can never make my decisions for me again. She didn't apologize immediately. Trust didn't magically repair itself. But the boundary remained. Months later, I hosted a small dinner at my house. When the doorbell rang, Brandon and Melissa were standing outside. By then, they had found another apartment. Melissa smiled awkwardly. "Can we come in?" The question was simple, but I noticed it. She waited. I stepped aside. "Come in." Mom wasn't there that evening. Not because I wanted revenge. Because access to my life was no longer automatic, and trust had to be rebuilt instead of demanded. After dinner, Brandon and Melissa left. I cleaned the kitchen, turned off the lights, and walked to the front door. Then I locked it. The deadbolt slid into place with a quiet click. Months earlier, I might have heard that sound as shutting my family out. Now I understood it differently. I had bought this house with my own money. I had earned the right to decide who entered it. And I had finally learned that loving my family did not require surrendering ownership of my life. My house was mine. My decisions were mine. And nobody would ever again mistake my kindness for permission.